Okay, thank you. And thank you to the members of the public who took the time to come and speak to us tonight. Board members, Mrs. Lamone, Ms. Lamone?
So before we go item through item, I actually have heard from the comment at the last 3 meetings, and I know in person and via email as well, about one of the concerns being the what seems to be the disproportionate cuts around staff. So I would like Mr. Smith to possibly give us a background of why some staff members or groups, better said, take larger cuts proportionate to the budget. And I think that there's a couple items that could highlight that.
Well, one of the things we were actually asked by one of the bargaining units to go back and look retrospectively for the last 4 years, to look at the number of FTEs by group, breaking out management from certificated, from classified. And if we look at those groups and we look at the number of FTEs in terms of net gain or net loss over the last 4 years, certificated has taken the biggest decrease, which would be expected because we're in a declining enrollment pattern. And I'm not to say that they haven't taken decreases above and beyond that, because I know they have.
I'm sorry, Mr. Smith, you're referring to this?
I'm referring to this.
Is there some way that we could put this up on the screen?
Meg, can we put this on the overhead? I'll probably need another one to look at. So what you see here is from 2007 through 2010, and if you look at the top 5 rows up there, we're looking at changes in the number of full-time equivalents between 07, 08, 09, 010, looking at certificated management, which is administrators that have a teaching credential, classified management, administrators who do not possess a teaching credential, classified regular and certificated regular. You'll see that by and large, management has remained flat. Classified has actually increased from 498 in 2007 to 537 in 2011, with certificated taking the biggest decrease from 797 FTEs in 2007 to 709, almost 710 FTEs in 2010. So I think that the assertion that, somehow we're bringing back certificated staff all the time at the expense of classified losing bargaining unit positions, that's just not a valid assumption.
Ms. Lamone, did that?
I think, yeah, the greater question is if we look at, I think if we look at this, we see that at least what I'm seeing here is that management has stayed steady throughout and has not.
Yeah, and we have a little bit of a dip down and we came back. Obviously we have not increased, but I think you also have to look at that in context of the School Services of California study, which was done in April of 2008, which basically gave us comparative data among like-size, like-type districts, and we were below their mean average in almost every single category.
Ms. Parker? Oh, I'm sorry.
Well, while that is still up on the screen, I would also say that what I suspect has happened in both the classified positions and the certificated management, because for certificated you can see, for the management you can see that we did cut by 5%. It was the special ed study that came back, and I know that those 2 hires were for the special ed department for management, and I suspect it's quite a few special ed instructional assistants
That's probably
that have come
correct.
into classified regular.
But I'm just looking at it in overall FTEs, not what the underlying factors are.
Okay. Mrs. Deacon?
No, that was just going to be my comment too, is I know that when we hired our special ed team, we added actually a few positions, and I think that accounts from going from 40 to 42. and then there's the classified instructional assistants.
I also don't know how many people, how long people's experience with the district has been, but I think it was 2004, was it 2004? When there were cuts that were made that might have been earlier than that, where a number of management positions and administrative positions in the district office were also reduced. So that has been an issue. But one of my concerns in looking at why it may appear, well, first of all, I have to preface that by saying none of these have been done yet. So it remains to be seen where the cuts actually take place, because we have to decide what we're going to do. But while it may appear that certain groups are, at least in the list, more heavily represented, I want to reiterate something I said last week, which is that most of these, or certainly a lot of these, have been on this list in previous years, and they have been spared while other things were cut. So a number of the reasons why, or some of the reasons why some of these are here now is because we have recognized their importance and we have maintained them. And now we are just at the point where we have to make cuts beyond what we ever imagined that we would have to do. And I just think that we all have to recognize that there is no way to cut $10 million out of our budget without feeling the difference. It's like if all of a sudden, in your household, you had to live on half of what you make now. You couldn't do that without feeling a difference. So we have to accept that, we are going to feel it. It's going to hurt. And that's unfortunately the nature of the beast. So we try to figure out which pain we can live with, and which pain is too hard to bear. But that's basically where we are at this point. Having made all these cuts for so many years, we are now looking at which is the most tolerable pain. So with that in mind, I think we need to, maybe go through our list, see which things we feel we can tolerate, which pain we feel we can tolerate, and which pain we want to postpone as long as we can. Mr. Smith, do we need to look at the mid-year adjustment page, or are those pretty much,
If you guys approve them, we'll just put them over in the parking lot.
okay, and these are not included in the $10 million?
That's correct.
Okay.
Because they will improve your fund balance, but it's all one-time money.
Right, okay, so let's start with page 4 and 5 of these mid-year adjustments and see if we can approve those, or at the very least, if we can approve many of them. They add up to a total of about 1.5 million. So, Mr. Herron?
I'll move the approval of items 1 through 4 on mid-year adjustments fiscal year 2010-11.
Okay, do we have a second?
I will second that.
Okay, great. Do we have any discussion?
I have a comment. With regard to the sweeping of the instructional materials accounts, I think that we will be required sometime during the year to do a public hearing, just like you'll have to do if you sweep more of that Tier 3 categorical, and so we'll bring back that, just so we're adhering to what the auditor's requirements will be.
Great, thank you. Okay, so we have a motion on the floor, made and seconded. I think there was no further discussion, so I will call the question. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries 5-0. Okay, we got through that page. I'm just going to run through this list alphabetically, and basically what I'm going to ask is there anyone who objects to that? So that if there is, we are not going to discuss it at this time. We'll just keep going and find the ones that we agree on. Okay, so A, is there anybody who objects to item A? Okay, so we won't do A. How about B? And I want to make sure that I'm being clear for the audience. We won't do A at this time. Okay? Is there anyone who objects to B? Okay? Is there anyone who objects to C? No, okay, C is one of the ones we can agree on. Is there anyone who objects to D? Yes, okay. Is there anyone who objects to E? Yes, okay. Anyone who objects to F? Yes, okay. Anyone who objects to G? Anyone who objects to H? Okay, I? Okay. J? K? L? M? I think, I was going to say, I think this is another one we might agree on. Okay? N? Yes, objects, okay. O? No objection to O. Okay, good. And Ms. Jate, are you kind of keeping track for us? Good, okay, thank you very much. P? Okay. Q? R? Do we have objections to R? Yes, okay. S? Nobody objects to S. Okay, do we want to discuss whether that would be 30 to 1 or 35 to 1?
Yes.
Okay, so we are agreed that we want to make this change, but we may have to come back for discussion on how much. Okay, T? We have pulled T, basically, so, okay. U? Well, we have an objection, I think, to you. Mr. Herron, you were objecting to you?
Parity, yes.
Okay. V? Are we objecting to V? Okay. W? Yes, okay. X? Are we objecting to X? Okay.
Yeah.
Y? Yes. Z? Yes. Double A? Yes. Double B? Yes. Okay. Okay, so
Got a long ways there.
we did not agree on too many, but how much have we
You'd even make
reached so-
10%.
We're not,
Gonna be a long night.
we're not at 1 million, and we need to get to 10. So, let's go back. Yes, it is a start. Thank you, Dr. Sarvis, for looking at the bright side. Okay, so let's go back to, do we want to have discussion on item A? Is there anyone who wants to make a case for actually doing this?
I made my point real clear last meeting. I understand there's an email from the chairman of the Measure H committee. I did not see it. Does anybody have it that they can read it?
I'm sorry, I don't bring my phone out
Oh,
here, but
okay. Can you-
I can share with you that the chairman of the Measure H committee felt that it was inappropriate to pour all of our resources into just one piece of the partial tax measure when it was meant to be balanced across every proposal that was listed on the measure.
Thank you. You'll notice that the comments about Measure H Oversight Committee have been deleted from this document because it is very clear that, in the minutes anyway, draft minutes, that Measure H Committee did not take a position. It's very clear from any historical standpoint you can talk about or see or read that the intent was to keep math side at 20 to 1 in the promotion to the public. And I'm a believer that we need to uphold what we told the public in both in relationship to Measure H as it relates to class size reduction and also the other arts and music and tech and science and the other things. So I would like at all possible to keep this off the table. And maybe we have to come back to it, but at this point, I don't want to mess with the voters.
Okay, do we have any other comments on that, on A?
Well, I actually agree with Mr. Herron on that one, but I would like to propose, because I have a feeling the way we're going now, we're going to keep going through this list multiple times, and maybe we should jump to those things that even though we weren't 100% sure we wanted to do, that we would be more willing to live with than others, and that might get us more quickly to our bottom line. So I would just like to throw out there for consideration the notion of going to the furloughs. And those are the negotiated items, but I would like to go ahead and put those up there. And just to get the discussion going, I would like to put it at the max of 10 days. And just so the public understands, this is all employee groups. It's not just teachers, it's not just classified, it's also administrators. So it's everybody. So I would like to suggest that we put W, X, and Y at 10 days up there, just as a starting point to talk about it.
Okay, well, let's talk about W, X, and Y. They certainly would get us there a lot more quickly. If we look at reducing the, I'm sorry, not W, I think it's,
It is W.
okay, reducing the school year.
Yeah.
Okay. So if we look at reducing the school year by 10 days, we're looking at basically $4 million.
Mrs. Cordero?
Yes.
May I just be sure that it's clear that it's reducing the teacher work year? And it's the school year by 5 days, teacher work year by 10.
So the students would have the same number of days. No. Oh, I'm sorry, the students would have 5 fewer. The teacher, I keep thinking of the 5, I'm not thinking of the 10. The teachers would have 10 fewer work days. The students would have 5 fewer class days. And that would be for $4 million. The classified staff furlough at 10 days would be almost 4 million, 3,885. And the administrative and confidential furlough days, and this is a total, we only have here a total of 5 for 200,000, so I'm assuming,
Is that
Is that-
right, Mr. Smith? Because I thought we had calculated that at 10.
No, I thought what we did was 10 for confidential and an additional 8 for management. Is that correct, Meg?
In fact, if you look at the figures, I believe the 85,000 corresponds to 3 additional days for administrators. The $218,000.
Oh, the $218,000, okay.
Corresponds to 8
To the
additional days.
8 additional days, beyond the 2 that they already have, so that for a total of 10.
We should make that change as well.
Okay, so that would be 218,000. So that would give us over 8,000. I'm sorry, over 8
Close to
million.
9 million.
However, I have real reservations about 10 furlough days. Mr. Herron?
I did some calculations for 8, instead of going from 8 to 10, or 5 to 10, to go between 5 and 8, and it would generate about $6,482,000, which might be an easier number to recoup if we can't negotiate it, but 8 would be an in-between number too. 8 days.
Well, I don't think of 8 as being too in between. It's a lot
Well-
closer to 10.
Well, you've got a choice between 5 or 10, and 8 is in between. You've got 5 days or 10 days on these 2 examples, and it could be 7.5, but that would be right in between, but 8 is close.
Right, but what I'm saying is they're going from 2, so 5 would be an increase, is my point.
I think it's a given we're going to go from 185 to 180. The question is, we're going to go from 180 to 175, and I'm saying to go to 178.
Okay, I understand your point. Comments on this, Ms. Parker?
Mr. Herron, first of all, I want to say thank you. I mean, that is another possibility too, and maybe as we play through with the numbers, that is something that we could do, somewhere between 5 and 10 for the maximum. I mean, I want to reiterate that I don't want to cut any of this $10 million, but it is going to have to come from somewhere. I also want to say a big thank you to Mr. Smith, because it is through your work that we have this possibility of recouping $6 million through unification, and I so highly appreciate it. The other $4 million is going to rely on the ballot measure in June, and there's no hope of it at all if it doesn't actually get on a ballot, and it is currently being blocked, and in fact that charge is being led by our own state senator, Tony Strickland. If you have not already contacted Tony Strickland's office, his phone number is 965-0862. I don't have a lot of hope because he has dug in his position, but I do think it's important for our elected officials to know how the voters feel. So even though he may not change his mind because he's come out so strongly against voters having the right to have a say on this, I do think it's really important to know that. In terms of this particular item, I know that our employees' salaries have, even though we've been fortunate, a lot of other districts already went to furlough days 2 years ago. We've been fortunate that we've been able to hold it off. Staff have not gotten regular raises, but I know that the monthly pay is declining because your health benefit costs have been going up. We tried to mitigate that somewhat this year. One time, I know it didn't cover everything in terms of the increases, and I'm so, I just feel terrible about it, I really do. But at the same time, we have cut programs, and we have cut programs for the entire 4 years that I've been on this board. We've done that every single time. That is why this time I would support going to furlough days. Again, I'm hoping that by May we would be able to mitigate at least some of them, and maybe by June we could eliminate all of them. That to me is the ideal position. But I've reduced student services so much over the past 4 years that I don't feel that that is the best service that I can provide for my community and for my students that I'm responsible for up here as a board member this year. So I would support a 5-day furlough. I would support a 10-day furlough. Not because I want to do it, but because I think that for our community, for our schools, and for our students, that unfortunately tonight that's the best thing to do.
Mrs. Deacon?
We're all really hopeful that at a minimum unification goes through, and if it does, then we're looking, as you've heard, at $6 million to take away from this $8,900,000 number. And I think logistically, it's a lot easier to restore furlough days than it is to restore jobs. I think it's much more disruptive for staff to take away their jobs and then give them back because people may have to make other plans. I mean, they have to pay rent, they have to pay their mortgages, they have to know where their paycheck is going to come from. So if we do the furloughs, at least they have a paycheck. And so that's why I'm really advocating this position. I'm really hopeful that, if we put the 10 up there now, it means less people get notified of cuts now. So I think that that's my preference. People who work in public education don't do it for the money. You already know that. You're already putting your students first. If we lay off people or we cut classified jobs as well as teachers' jobs, class sizes are going to go up. That's going to impact the students. The learning environment is going to be degraded if we cut our custodial services, our health assistants, our nurses, our office assistants. Everyone's going to suffer. So I would just like to reiterate this point that we did use that one-time educational jobs money to provide funds to every single classified working employee and every certificated instructor, and that was a good faith effort. It was something we were able to do. So now, unfortunately, I think we have to ask people to consider to do with less, and hopefully we can undo it. But I think it'll be less disruptive if we do it this way. So I I'd like to stay at the 10, and then when we come back in May with our second list of cuts, we'll be in a much better position to know what other things we would have to do. Obviously, we need $1.1 million still to get to 10, but that's my opinion.
Ms. Lamone?
As an educator, these are tough cuts. These are really tough cuts. I think that I will echo everything that's been said, but also acknowledge the fact that I'm going to say we, because I think we all recognize that this will impact the quality of education in the classroom and outside of the classroom. I can support 5 furlough days. I think that we need to get to 10 million. It's not a request by an individual, it's a mandate for the school board. And I also, in hearing my colleagues up here, could do 8 and I could do 10. I think that there's no way around this. We are all going to feel the pain. So I think it's going to be shared by everyone, including all of us. So I could support 5, 8, or 10.
I would like to support 10 because it would make our decisions a lot easier, I think. We'd reach that number very quickly. I have a hard time supporting 10. As a teacher, to take 10 days of salary away from our teachers, our classified staff, even our administrators who have been, the problem is people have to get the work done. And I sometimes fear that we are able to consider these kinds of cuts because we know people will do the job anyways, even though they're not getting paid for it. And that to me seems to punish commitment rather than rewarding it. And yet I know we have to do this, so I understand why people are supporting it. I guess I'm a little concerned about, I would like to maybe consider some other options before we go to 10 days.
Well, my suggestion would be that we keep the 10 days up there, but then start running through the ones that we don't have up there yet. And it could be that we will be able to agree to something that's more than, $1 million, 1.1 million, in which case we could then readdress and start shrinking those furlough days down to match whatever we're able to agree on for the other numbers.
Okay, let's try that. Are there other things that we want to consider putting on the list? Mr. Herron?
No, I was just going to say that two things. One, the theme of all the correspondence I've received, the underlying theme was furloughs are a good way to go. I mean, just look at the speakers tonight. Nobody wants their jobs cut. And one speaker even mentioned go for furloughs. But I had that in many emails, is that furloughs would be the most effective across the board. But if we go 10 million, we're going to know real quick whether or not we're going to have to get rid of some of, or, well, no. It seems like we need to hit some other wood just to show what the effects will be.
What the effects will be if we can't negotiate the furloughs, okay. Okay, so are there other items that people are willing to put up for consideration as well? Ms. Parker?
Well, the two others that I had on my list that I would like to talk about are S and U.
Okay, so that would include the increased staffing ratio at the MAD Academy partnership from either 25-1 to 30-1 or 35-1. That is what I also wanted to address, so were there objections to this one? I think we just wanted to discuss whether it would be 30 or 35. I personally was willing to see this one go up to 35 because that's what the other classes are staffed at. And given the nature of our economic hardship, it seemed to me reasonable to staff it at the same level at which we staff other classes. But if somebody wants to argue for 30,
I had just put it in at 30, but I don't know what our ongoing relationship with them is or what obligations we have to them, if any, what kind of, I don't know what their workload is in those classes.
Mrs. Parker?
I think that the MAD Academy is a terrific resource. All of our academies are. It is a partnership academy, which means that the district already is required by the state to supplement their funding. And we do. I think in this case, it's resources given towards the director of the academy. And then on top of that, unfortunately, we're also staffing those schools, that academy, I should say, at a smaller class size than our other classes. And given the number of academies that we have across the district, I don't feel like we can continue to do that, especially as I'm looking at resources for the other schools. I really feel strongly that we need to treat our schools equally.
So are you suggesting 35? Okay.
And I
Ms.
just had a
Deegan?
question, because I actually think that's a parity issue as well, but are the other academies all staffed at 35 to 1? So it's pretty hard to make a case to single out one academy.
I should clarify that these classes that we're talking about are computer labs. So it means having 30 computers and workstations, or 35 computers and workstations.
That's my concern.
So let me ask a question then. If we staff them at 35 to 1, are we going to incur additional costs in order to equip the labs with the additional equipment that would be needed? Or does that already, do we have that already in existence somewhere?
No, we would probably incur additional costs to get geared up to that level.
I just have to say, I've taught in settings where students share computers in a lab setting like that, so it's not completely unheard of. I also really appreciate the MAD Academy Foundation, and I know they do a lot of fundraising, and this might not be their first choice where their money goes, but they could donate money to buy down the class size if they wanted to. And I know we're looking for these public-private partnerships wherever we can, so that would be one suggestion.
We did
Mr. Herron?
we did approve a class for the Green Academy at 20 to 1. Is that going to be reconsidered?
I didn't recall that was 20 to 1.
I believe that that's like a collab situation, and it's when bringing in at-risk students. So the potential for buying down with categorical funding is there. So we're probably not talking, we're not talking about the same kind of situation.
Okay.
Okay, then do we want to leave it at 35? I just want to make sure that it's going to be cost-effective with the computer labs. I don't want to do this and then have to spend additional funds to where we end up not really realizing very much of this savings.
Well, Mr. Smith, I mean, that would be one-time funding to increase the number of computers in a room, right?
That's correct. Your marginal ongoing cost would be whatever additional electricity, but as far as equipping would be concerned, it'd be one-time money.
But, so that one-time money would come from,
Well, you know that 1.5 million? you
That's
put
what I
away,
was
that's-
wondering,
that's-
yes.
yeah, you would start chipping away at that.
okay.
And there goes your fund balance.
There goes our fund balance, yes. Okay, so let's consider leaving it at 35 to 1. Where are we now? Okay. Other items that, oh, you said T, did you say? You, I'm sorry. Okay, achieve parity in staffing of comprehensive high schools. Okay, this would be another 500,000, 548,000. Discussion on this item? Mrs. Deacon? Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay. Well, I think we're talking about San Marcos here and going from 33 to 35, is that right, per class?
Well, there are a couple ways to look at it. If we were talking about going from 33 to 35 and just that, then we'd be looking at 3 FTEs, and that'd be $260,000. I know that a staff member at the school invited a discussion about whether we ought to look at it on the basis of additional sections and the cost of the district of providing additional sections, and that's where you see this figure.
That's right. I'm sorry, I forgot the calculation on that. I was actually really pleased to get communication from San Marcos because they sounded like, even though I know it will be hard on them, that they realize that this is something that needs to happen. So it was my impression, and other board members may have a different view, that San Marcos actually was willing to go there.
Ms. Parker?
Yes, I had great communication from San Marcos on this one, and while there was strong feelings, I would say, about the history behind this and wanting there to be a lot of discussion about that, I didn't get any sense at all from the staff there that they had any desire to be different from the other schools. They wanted to be treated just as fairly and just the same way as the others, and I thought that those were really positive. I mean, I know that there are about 4 or 5 different ways to approach the staffing parity issue, because a block schedule does not compare directly with the traditional schedule. And so there's just a lot of different ways to look at it, but I appreciate this as a first step, and I'm certainly willing to put that on the list.
Okay, I have no objections to this one. This was one of the ones that
I like the thought that there'll be discussions about it. I don't want it to appear that it's a gun to their head. That, hey, let's do this jointly, let's work it out, let's make it fair, let's make it good. So put it on there, but I hope we can take on a dialogue with them to come to a conclusion that everyone agrees with.
Board Member Heron, it still need to be negotiated.
Well, that's what I mean. Let's do it negotiating with fairness, that it's not a gun to their head that you got to do this.
we always negotiate with fairness.
And I would just add that in the communication that I received, I appreciated all the detailed background information, but also the spirit of cooperation, because I don't think that anyone at San Marcos, or if the other high schools had a different opportunity, would back away from that opportunity. But I think that there's an understanding that the situation is so dire and requires us to rethink and have these conversations. So I would support it.
Great. I want to echo that, because I do think that that San Marcos deserves recognition for how willing they were to discuss this item and to provide information to us, et cetera, a variety of things that they were willing to do in a spirit of really wanting to work together. So, okay, so I see this magic number up there. What does that mean to us? The grand total we have so far is,
9.6.
so we need.
So we need
we
3.
need, okay.
389.
To reach 10 million at 10 furlough days. So if we want to rescind any of those, we need to go past that as well. So let's move onward. Are there any other items that board members felt you were willing to consider? Mrs. Parker?
My other one that I found somewhat less painful was B, the sweeping the Tier 3 categoricals. I don't have any objections to the staff recommendations for the ones being that are suggested to be removed, which were the elementary librarian, GATE, YSS funding, the list that is in the fiscal solvency plan. I know that there are many programs within there that are doing great service for our students. I would prefer not to go to the highest amount for the sweep on this. I would prefer to go to the lowest amount, but there is also the middle amount. This is the one where, you know, if you went to the middle, it may start to affect the number of furlough days that you could conceivably maybe cut back on some of those. So I would be able to support either the lowest or the middle for item B.
Could I have clarification? So,
For item B, as is for the amounts that are listed on this sheet,
Okay.
which already have those
Deducted
totals
out.
deducted out.
Okay,
For
that was my
the
question.
programs being saved, so that's, lowest is, it's up there, the
Yeah,
795,000.
so we're looking at 795,000, so almost 800,000, or 1.3 million. Ms. Lamone?
I would like to ask us to consider the lowest. I think in looking at this and looking this more carefully, it is going to impact mostly certificated hourly, and I think that combined with the furloughs, I would like to keep it on the lower end if this is going to be considered.
Mr. Herron?
How do we know what's going to be eliminated if we say 795, 770? Who determines? I hate to vote something and not know what the results are.
well, we've noticed everybody that's on the list. So basically, the way I would envision this happening is that the amounts that would be distributed to the site that have been used on a discretionary basis, they would be deficited by that percentage. So actually, the site councils will ultimately arrive at what they're going to do with less money.
So it's not an administrative decision, it's not a school board decision, it's,
Your decision is to reduce the amount.
I would just like to echo that I would prefer to see us look at the lowest amount to start with. You know, if we feel like we really need to go back and reconsider a higher amount, we can, but I'd like us to start with the lowest. Mrs. Deacon?
In light of this discussion on B and the Tier 3 categoricals, I would like to discuss it in light of D, because I'd like to kind of compare those two so that we get a feel for how students are impacted there.
That's the supplemental hourly. Was that addressed to me or to Robin?
Actually, I think Mrs. Waski would probably be.
That pretty much is our tutorials, after school, and summer school. Last summer, we cut dramatically our services for summer school. Mostly elementary didn't have any, and we didn't have any in junior high except for ones that were privately funded or in grants and such. And then at the high school level, we kept, of course, the Casey support, and we used some categorical funding. I don't know if it was hourly, probably some of it, but we are committed to having our students who are at risk for not graduating to have that opportunity. So we kept that in place. It was really cut substantially. I don't know how much of this figure we reduced last summer. I'm not sure how that plays out, but that's what it's talking about, the extra, the hourly,
Right, with the
mostly summer
exception
school.
of the high school exit exam.
Which we
Correct.
would keep, but that number isn't included in here.
That's
Because I
correct.
actually, if I had to balance those two, I would probably want to keep more of the Tier 3 money. And so, you know, depending on how far we want to go in knocking down the furlough days, I might go to D and the smaller amount on B. I also just wanted to talk a little bit about the Tier 3s. When we look at the programs in there and the ones that we want to protect and the ones that we know are really valuable. CalSafe is $100,000, and it's a really important program, and I really value what we do. There are 17 students in that program right now, which works, and sometimes it goes up to as many as 25, but that works out to almost $8,000 per student in that program. And so I just want to bring that to everyone's attention as we're looking at how we are spending our funds.
Thank you, Ms. Deegan. That's a good point that you make. I'm not sure exactly what we want to do with that information, but yes, it's definitely something that we should be thinking about.
If there was a way to economize in that program, and I mean, there's a lot of staff that serve those current 17 students. That's why it's $198,000.
So I guess the question is, are there ways to reduce the amount?
I don't know if this.
I don't know
mandated.
if anyone's prepared to talk about that. I mean, I don't know, Debbie, are you prepared at all, or? I can answer a couple questions. Okay.
Thank you for letting us put you on the spot.
That's okay. As you said, Board Member Deacon, you said that there are 17 students, but it's not just 17 students. We have 17 students plus 17 babies, so it's a total of 34. The Department of Education, for CalSafe, the ratio is 1 to 4. And right now we have a couple of babies that have just returned. I mean, we have one that's 6 weeks and we have one that's 8 weeks. And even a 1 to 4 is a real big stretch for a staff person. Any other questions? Okay,
Are there
thank
any
you.
other questions?
No, I
Okay.
mean, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Barker?
I would just chime in that I also would prefer to go for the lowest amount on item B. I know what's going on with item C also, however, and that is things like after-school tutorials for the students that are basic level and need to be pushed to proficient. I mean, there are consequences for everything that we do.
Right. the
Do you mean D or
intercession-
C?
Sorry, D.
D, okay.
Not for
And-
C.
And the intercessions at our 2 year-round schools.
So that sweeps everything but the KC back into the general fund, correct, Mr. Smith? Okay. So I would certainly be willing to look at that if we want to reduce, because at this point, if we put in the lowest amount for item B, does that already take us over? That does take us over. So we could start looking at other ones that we're willing to do to reduce furlough days.
Okay, so are we suggesting at this time not to include D?
Well, at this point, we need to start talking about furlough days again, because normally I would say, okay, go to the lowest and let's stop. But if we want to get it down to 8 furlough days, for example, instead of 10, then we need to keep going, in which case I think that D would be reasonable. It'd be unfortunate for our students. It would be reasonable to talk about it.
If I could say something about D, I think that D should kind of still be part of the conversation, but I'm not sure we're ready to put it on there until I don't know if there's anything else, any of the other items, or if this is it. We're really just talking about D, E, and the furloughs. So I'd ask to leave it on there for the moment.
Okay. Mr. Herron?
Another item, I, what 3 classified support positions at the district office, how would that affect the operation of the district office?
Well, anytime you have a reduction in force, it's going to have an effect. You know, at this point, we haven't had the conversations with either those employees or even those employees' supervisors, so I'm reluctant to talk about it much publicly. But yeah, it'll have an impact, there's no doubt about it.
But all of these have an impact, whether it's counselors, nurses, librarians, they all have an impact. So what's the least impact, I guess? Or what is, I mean, if we know what the librarian impact is, we know what the nurses' impact is, we know what the counselors' impact is. I just don't know what reducing 3 classified, how that impacts us.
Yes, Mrs.
Can
Deegan?
I would just like to hypothetically address that because we haven't really identified the positions yet. But I would say every time a teacher calls personnel to find out about their health benefits, they might be impacted. Every time someone needs an invoice paid, they might be impacted. Every time someone needs assistance in facilitating a repair or something that's done by the maintenance, they might be impacted. So we'll all feel it. Everyone will feel that. And I guess I come back to the furloughs just because I would rather spread it around as opposed to target specific individuals. And our district office is lean. It's easy to say cut the administrators, but we've cut. And they are scrambling to do their jobs day in, day out. If you talk to them regularly, you'll find that out. And that goes for the principals and the assistant principals too. You know, we've lumped assistant principals, which are on this list, in the administrator category, but without them, our students would really be impacted. So that just keeps taking me back to the furloughs, and it's hard. It's really hard. But we've cut.
Well, how about Q, 9th grade class English size? Either to 30 to 1 or 35 to 1.
Well, I think we were, I certainly my hope to not have to raise class size, but it's, of course, my hope to not have to do any of these, so all of them are bad. What do other board members think? If we are going to discuss it, I would only like to discuss 30 to 1. I would not want to consider 35 to 1. Any board members feel like this is something that we ought to do?
Not for me.
Well, not ought to, but need to.
I know we've already, obviously this was originally intended to be 20 to 1. We already increased class size in 9th grade to 25 to 1. It was already disappointing in both our K-3 and in our 9th grade English to have had to make those changes in past years, and I just don't want to hit it again and make it worse.
Well, and we've also protected 9th grade math in item A, and to be honest, grading lots and lots of papers as an English teacher is a lot of hard work, so I would prefer to stay at 25 to 1 there.
As an English teacher, I would prefer to stay at 25 to 1 as well. Ms. Lamont?
I would like to stay at 25 to 1, but if we were to consider anything, I'd probably only consider the 30 to 1.
What about R? But, we have in R just the, what it would do if we only looked at 3rd grade. And that would be the 335,000. Ms. Lamont?
So my position still stands as it did last week. That one, I have a really hard time going higher. And truthfully, I probably have a harder time going higher for the K-3 than I do for the 9th grade. So.
Yeah, I would not even, I wouldn't want to consider anything other than just 3rd grade, but even that I'm easily talked out of. Okay, so let's kind of, for the time being, say we're not going to do Q and we're not going to do R.
What do you want to do, grade papers or take care of kindergarten kids? Or 3rd grade kids? I don't know. Give me the papers.
I think that sounds like someone who hasn't graded papers. Okay.
You know, one thing we haven't talked about, which I hope we don't talk about, is the nurses versus LVNs versus health assistants. It might be worthy of talking about it at some other point. In this context, there's just too many moving parts in that and affects too many people, and I just would hope we wouldn't talk about that at this stage.
And
Okay.
I think the way to handle that is through attrition, probably, maybe through retirement if we absolutely needed to go there for cost savings. But to my mind, why lay off existing staff to hire new people? I
Yeah,
mean, that doesn't make sense to me at all.
That's a bigger discussion, I think.
I agree. Okay, so as I look through these, I guess I have a question about I. No, I'm sorry, not I. O. The site level program specialist.
Which we already, it's already on the list.
Is that, did we already, I'm sorry, okay, I apologize. Then that, I think, kind of brings us back to D, to have further discussion with D, because I really don't see anything else that we haven't put up there already that,
May I ask a question of Mr. Smith or Ms. Jete?
Yes.
What would it cost to do 9 furlough days instead of 10? What would we even, just for, like, what is one furlough day? I mean, it's, if you can just do the calculation for me, since I don't have my calculator in front of me. Right, for all 3. No. Well, the reason I ask that is it seems pointless to continue the discussions if it's gonna cost
At
more
10 days, if we're talking $8 million for 10 days, then we're talking about $800,000 per day.
Okay.
Can you scroll up too so we can see where we are at the bottom line or down or whatever direction that is?
And the reason why I say that is because I have, you know, 2 calculations. One of them is on the unrestricted side of the budget only. And then there's, when you furlough, you're going to furlough everyone. So we have the categorical side of the budget to the restricted side of the budget.
And your bases are different because you've got management that already has 2 that's going additional 8, and that's not the case with the 2 other units.
Okay.
So you just can't do a simple percentage and extrapolate.
Okay.
I can.
Well,
Just as an example, if you went to 8 under W, it would be about $3.2 million in W instead of 4.039.
Right,
So,
and on, that's correct, because you and I went over that
Right.
calculation earlier, and I was looking for it, and I couldn't find where I put it, so I apologize for that. But on the furlough days for the administration, you know, we already have 2, so you're looking at 8.
okay, so that would take them off, okay.
They are
So
8,
they're 8.
they stay at
That would
8
stay
at
the same.
218, with confidential.
Wouldn't we reduce them to 6
You moved
so
them
that
to
they
6.
matched?
I don't know, I was, oh, right,
Yes,
right,
you'd move them
okay.
to 6.
Okay, you're right, right.
If you move them to 6, it's about 140,000 guesstimate. And the X, moving to 8 would be about 4 million. Guesstimate.
I'm sorry, X moving to 8? It's at 3.8 million now, 3.9 million.
And I'd say it would go to 3.0.
So about $1 million there. I mean, it just seems like, I know, that just seems like,
Well, I say it's a guess.
I guess I'm just hesitating on further discussions on other areas because I don't even know that we can get to 1 day, much less 2 days, without going to places that we've already expressed that if we have to go there, I would prefer to talk about those in May and not now. Because if it comes down to it and we can't resolve things through negotiations and we can't unify and we're going to be having this conversation in May again anyway, And so,
Just one clarifying comment. You would still be forced to move forward with the classified notices by
yes,
April 29th, because
absolutely.
otherwise you would not have that flexibility.
right. So I would expect every person affected by the plan in general to have a notice, either as a teacher or classified, by the required date.
Correct.
Madam President, just to go
Mr.
over.
Herron?
I think what Mrs. Parker is saying is totally correct, because in my calculations, going to 8 days, to get to 10 million, I would have had to affect ninth grade English, counselors, grounds, custodial, site, assistant principals, nurses. I mean, all of those would be affected in some category to go from 10 to 8. So it's not, when you get from 8 up, you got a lot of categories to touch before you can make up that extra $2 million.
Okay. Mrs. Deacon?
So we're at 10,407,738,000 right now. Is there a way, maybe not tonight, to back out that overage, the amount that goes over 10,000, and see where we can bring that money back, and in what categories it might make sense? It doesn't seem like it'll buy us a furlough day, but we might be able to make a smarter decision about where we put that money back. If our initial position was to stay with the 10 furlough days, hoping that unification passes, even though we've noticed everybody, that then we revisit the cuts, which, you know, we will probably have to revisit twice, depending on what happens with the election, although I guess if it doesn't get to the ballot, we'll know that right away.
Right.
But that would be just a thought, is to maybe go back and look at this, where we're now beyond 10 million, and what would be the wisest places to put that money back.
Well, I'm wondering along those lines if we could look at a smaller percentage of sweeping from tier 3. The smallest we've considered is 50%, but could we look at 25%?
Sure.
Ms.
And
Lamont?
I actually would like to echo that. Perhaps if that would be one of the first places that we would look at doing, I don't know what the math would be, but whatever.
Be roughly half of that.
Mhm.
Yeah. But don't forget, you got to take about 10 computers for the Math Academy right off the top.
So after the 10 computers.
But that comes out of our 1.5 million, right? Well, that was the other thing I was going to suggest. We could also go back and consider 30-1 for the Math Academy instead of 35.
I think there was an issue actually about space in the rooms in the Math Academy and how many students fit in those rooms. I think I recall some discussion along those lines. But, I mean, if we're buying computers for one program, can another program reasonably come to us and say, we need more computers too?
We're redesigning the room space, and we'll make sure that we could accommodate 35. It may well be that the foundation will want to buy down those numbers, and we won't even have 35 in those rooms, but it would be foolish of us to design that space for anything less.
Okay. Ms. Barker and then Mr. Herron?
And I just want to echo what Ms. Limon said, that B is probably where I'd be most interested in perhaps looking at maybe 30%, just so we have a little bit of a cushion, sweeping the 30% of the remaining balance instead of 50%. The issue with S is that I think that every other academy would rightfully be very concerned if we were staffing one academy from general funds at a different ratio than they were being staffed at.
I don't disagree with that at all. I just think that in other cases when we've made this change, we haven't made quite such a drastic change all at once. So if we could do it, to go from 30-1, and then maybe go to up to 35 if we, I don't know. And as Dr. Sarvis said, the foundation may buy it down anyways. the partnership may buy it down, so we hope. We don't know. We're making assumptions that perhaps we shouldn't make. Mr. Herron?
Yeah, speaking of assumptions, one big one is, can we negotiate the 10 days of furloughs? When does that take place?
Right away.
We have dates.
Do you want to give some idea of the dates?
Well, we have dates. We have 2 dates set with the
Yeah.
SPTA already. that are
21st of March, I believe, and
21st and
24th.
24th, I believe.
Yeah, 21st and
And
24th.
I'm sure we'll have dates with CSEA soon, too.
Because we'll be back real soon if that doesn't work out.
That's right.
Yes, we will. Ms. Parker?
There is one other thing that I wanted to bring up, and that is item BB, reducing the board member compensation. After our discussion at the last meeting, I was actually surprised to see this the way it is presented, because my suggestion was actually that we be included, I mean, we only get a $400 stipend, but that we be included with all other employees in terms of taking an equivalent pay reduction. I really don't want to address that through changing the board bylaw. I would prefer to do what Dr. Sarvis did when he gave up 5% of his salary and make a donation to the district. And I would just suggest that we include like a voluntary equivalent. And I know the amount is negligible. This is really about a spirit of parity and making sure that everybody's being affected in a similar way.
I don't basically disagree with that, because it's going to, I mean, the amount that we get is so small anyways, it doesn't really make that much of a difference. But I do want to say that when you don't even, it doesn't even work out to minimum wage. You know, it's not exactly parity.
I think when I did the math, I was paying. to be
Yeah,
on-
I think exactly. We end up paying to be on the board. So that's not exactly parity.
Yeah. And I actually buy my health benefits through the school district, so I write a check for $200 every month in addition to the $400 I give up. So, just
Okay.
I would like to make one comment, just get, on page 12, under P, the student counselor, there's a paragraph at the end of that. It sort of implies that counselors can see their students 2.2 a day, which means at the end of the school year, they're seeing their last student the last day. It's a factual statement, no getting around it, but it's meaningless. And so I'd like to see that crossed off. To imply at all that we think counselors can get by with 2.2 students a day is just a nonsensical statement.
Okay, so, Ms. Parker?
I think I'd like to go ahead and make a motion that we adopt the budget cuts that we have described for the fiscal solvency plan phase 5, as listed, as we've discussed, and as listed on the screen right now. And if we make a motion to do that now, then perhaps we could then come back and talk about what comes back if there are negotiation issues, if there are, if money starts coming back because we've unified. But just to get this piece done so that we can then move on to other options.
Okay. Do we have a motion? Do we have a second?
I will second that.
Okay. And I'm going to suggest that, given the tentative nature of this, budget, that probably at this time, it's actually premature to talk about what to do with that extra 400,000, because if we don't reach agreement in negotiations, we're going to be coming back and cutting more anyway. So we may as well leave it there until we know whether it actually is surplus or not. So Is there any further discussion?
The one other addition I would say is that we do expect as a board through this motion that every employee that's listed as in the fiscal solvency plan in general will be noticed even without action being taken on their particular positions tonight.
Okay. Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Okay, this, for better or worse, is where we stand right now, and thank you to the public for sitting through this, thank you for board members for actually getting through this, and we will take a short break, which we all need. Thank you. Okay, I'm going to ask us to reconvene our meeting, if we could. Thank you very much. Mr. Smith informs me that we need to return briefly to item E2 to finish up the final discussion. And Mr. Smith, you wanted us to address...
Actually, there's two tasks before you. One was to identify kind of a phased plan for restoration in the event that future revenue actually showed up in the next few months. And then secondly, looking at, and I think this was really kind of a request board member Heron made at the last meeting, is are we going to identify cuts that are going to be ongoing, which are never going to be restored? So those were the two other items that were contained in the board agenda.
Okay, so let's start with the first question of how we will restore, should there...
And we should probably put
Become-
that list back up.
I think it's pretty simple.
I think it's pretty simple, too. I think...
First, you cut 5 days furlough with the first $4 million that comes in, or $5 million, or $6 million. And if you get all of it, you cut 10 days furlough.
For $8 million.
And-
Yeah.
and
I
as
would
far as-
suggest to go directly to the furlough days.
And as far as,
Yeah.
as far as the second question, the first 4 or 5 items that total like $700,000, those would be the ones that I would say don't bring back unless we let you come and ask us. But
So could I, if the board's all in agreement, they're all shaking their head, could I get a motion to that effect?
I just want to reiterate which ones those were.
Okay.
And I think those were item C, item M, item O, and
that was it, I think.
was that it? I think that was it.
And
Well, I had items S and U also. I mean, obviously, those are,
were those modified items, is that what those were?
well, S was the decision between 30
Oh,
and
MAD.
35.
Okay.
So can I suggest that we actually have the 3 phases? Perhaps the first phase, which it sounds like there's a consensus, would be bringing back the 5-day furloughs. The second phase would be bringing back the other 5 furloughs. And a third phase of bringing back or not bringing back, but considering the S and U. And then we have another column for those things like M, which is
CMNO.
CMN, yes, CMO, that would not come back.
Okay, and C, M, and O are, okay,
Mandated cost reimbursement, C is mandated cost reimbursements revenue, M is eliminate contract maximum nurses.
Okay.
And O is reduced to site level program specialists.
so it's really M and O since the mandated cost is a revenue stream,
Right,
so,
yes, so M and O stay in the not coming back.
ever. Okay.
Okay. And
that a
do
motion?
we need a...
That is a motion, if you could capture it.
I'll second it.
You okay? Is everybody clear on what the motion is? Okay. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Okay. Carries 5-0. So
Thank you.
did we address both parts of that for you, didn't we? Okay,
Thank you
so
very much.
We can move on to,
Thank you.
we can move on to item E3, positive certification of 2010, 2011, second interim financial report.
Thank you, Board. As you know, you're required twice each year to certify a financial interim report. The first interim report is a snapshot as of October 31st and has to be submitted and approved by the Board by December 15th. The second interim report, which is a more precise financial report, is actually a snapshot of our revenues and expenditures as of January 31st that has to be acted on by March 15th. The interim report actually does two things. It looks at our financials not only in the current year, but through a multi-year projection in the subsequent 2 years, and evaluates whether we can meet our minimum reserve requirement in the current and subsequent 2 years. As you know, our minimum reserve requirement is 3%. By virtue of making the expenditure reductions in the prior action, we can project that, subject to negotiation, that we would be able to meet our minimum reserve requirement and be able to submit a positive certification to the county education office. So what we have in front of you here is documents that contemplate that $10 million in cuts. What I'd like to do is briefly walk you through the narrative on the interim, and then once I'm done, Meg will walk you through the multi-year projection. And so what I'd like to do is start with page 1, which shows you really kind of the differences between the first and second interim report. You can see in the first table there, that shows all our funds, not just the general fund, but all the other special revenue and enterprise funds and building funds. And it shows you the difference between the first and second. And if my eyesight wasn't failing me, I would tell you what those numbers actually said. Went from 152 million to 154 million. So in any event, then below that, what you see is the revenues and the difference between both the unrestricted and restricted from the first to the second interim. And you can see the difference in revenues moving up from 116 to 117 million. But the problem we're dealing with is flip over to the next page, which shows you the difference in expenditures that's actually aligned or compared against those revenues. And that forms the basis of your structural deficit that we've talked about. So as we move down on page 2, you can see a summary of changes, by major unrestricted categories and unrestricted expenditures. And we have a summary that talks about those variances here in a minute. On page 3, I'm not going to bore you to death with this information on the governor's proposed budget, because I think we've covered that ground several times already. There's a number of things that we're concerned about with respect to the governor's budget, although we're happy that the proposed governor's budget is actually kind of revenue neutral for us. We're also concerned about the underlying assumptions and the fact that, whether you can broker a deal to get this thing out of the legislature, the temporary tax proposal out of the legislature and onto the state ballot. With respect to our significant variances at the second interim report on page 5, actually our variances between the second and first interim were pretty slight, actually. If you look at the revenue limit sources, we only had an increase of about $2,600. That was really due to prior year property tax allocation. Federal revenue increase of $41,000, very, very minor. Other state revenue, we had a variance of $562,000 in other state revenue, largely due to economic impact aid, but mostly due to the fact that we received mandated cost reimbursements as part of this budget. And since we budget those on a cash receipt basis, they weren't contemplated in the original budget. So that explains the variance. On the expenditure side, certificated salaries increased by about $748,000, just due to staffing adjustments, both on unrestricted and restricted. Classified salaries, there's an increase of $944,000 due to basically the reallocation of placeholder accounts in the categorical side of the budget from discretionary objects, meaning like the 4s, 5s, and 6s, because what happens is categorical monies come in. We don't know how they're going to be expensed. If they're going to be expensed for salary, they're placed held in a 4,000 account. And then when that's moved to actually fund salaries and benefits, that creates a variance. So if we move over to page 6, the employee benefits variances just kind of follow the certificated and classified salary objects. Books and supplies, there was a decrease of $580,000. Once again, that's a placeholder issue. Other operating expenses increased from first interim by about $296,000 due to an increase for mandate cost expenses and copier leases, because one of the things we did, the mandated cost expense is that, I don't know if the board recalls this, but about 3 years ago, we used to have a mandated cost consultant come in and we paid them every year, and we moved it to a contingency basis. When we actually got paid, they'd get paid. Well, we got money this year, so we had to pay them, and we had to pay them about over $100,000, I think. And we got about $400,000 in mandated costs, but, you know, I would have liked to keep it all, but that's the way it goes sometimes. Capital outlays increased by about $170,000 due to construction expense associated with the Dos Pueblos High School Engineering Academy, and other outgo had no significant variances. In the interest of time, I'm just going to try and, you've seen a lot of these charts several times. I'm going to try and hit the highlights. We know that the revenue limit sources are the largest portion of our budget. The elementary district's still in basic aid. Secondary is in revenue limit. Because the revenue limit is significant in the secondary district, we always look at what the cost of absenteeism is for us in terms of losing ADA because kids aren't attending school. You can see for the undeficited amount, we lose about $38 for each day, all day, when we don't have a student show up for school. Right now, we have a revenue limit deficit in the secondary district of 17.963, so our deficited revenue limit's about $5,972 per ADA. Since we're still in a declining enrollment pattern, we use what's called the prior year guarantee, which allows us to always use the greater of current year or prior year period 2 attendance to basically base our budget on.
On this one chart, what this doesn't show me is what's the problem in the secondary district versus the problem in the, well, there is no problem in the elementary district, but it doesn't really help me decide that 700, 800 students, what's that costing us at the secondary level? I did have correspondence with Megan. It's substantial.
Yeah, you're talking about attendance rate, looking at increased attendance rate as a percentage of enrollment. You're always going to see attendance in the secondary district is never going to be as good as it is in the elementary because you just have a lot of attrition. And one of the interesting things you can look at is look at the numbers in terms of attendance rate from the beginning of school toward the end of school, and you'll see this marked decline. Elementary, you usually see kind of a marked increase and then a kind of plateau out. Yeah, I've been in elementary districts that have been as high as 98.5% attendance. Secondary percentage, it's difficult to get beyond about 96, but I don't think we're anywhere near either one of those, so there's obviously a lot of opportunity for growth and increasing attendance.
There's an opportunity to get some money there.
Absolutely.
That somehow, I guess I would ask the question, what are we doing to change that? That's not a discussion now, but I think it's something we have to look at because that's
it's money.
That's $2 or $3 million.
Absolutely, absolutely. So I'm going to flip over to page 12, which shows us our contributions to restricted programs. Just quickly, probably the one that always jumps out at you is our local general fund contribution to special ed program is projected to be about $11,351,000, or about 53% of the entire special ed budget. Obviously, that's the biggest. And when I say contribution, what I mean by that is that when we have a restricted program that does not receive enough restricted funds either from the state or federal government, and we have to contribute unrestricted funds to make it whole, that's a local general fund contribution. I got out of the habit of using the industry standard term of encroachment because I was slapped too many times in public, but we'll use the more innocuous local general fund contribution. And we have others, and those are shown in the table on page 13. One of the things that you'll see is that we have a contribution to special ed transportation, to home to school, which is not that significant given the size of our program, to routine restricted maintenance account, which is really just an accounting shift because we're required to, actually we used to be required to have 3%, we reduced it down to 2% of our total combined budget has to be allocated for that function. And then one of the things that I think we talked about before is K3 and 9th grade are shown totally there, but that's kind of a misnomer in terms of how it's represented here. And I thought we caught that, but I guess we didn't this time. I'm just seeing that right now because we had that discussion and,
Yes,
and we've had it in print too. So
And I did have that highlighted in those, but I know that we know that that's how much it costs to staff all 9th grade classrooms and how much it costs to staff kindergarten through 3rd grade classes. It's not the differential.
it's not the marginal buy down or the differential, and we'll have to go back and fix that going into next year.
Could I just ask a quick question on the transportation home to school for secondary? I was surprised at how high that number is, given that we don't, I mean, there's this, special education busing services. What is that for the secondary transportation?
No, I know that we have a small amount that we pay to Goleta.
Well, one of the, and it's late, and I'm not sure, but I believe that one of our districts get home to school transportation for special, they both get it for special ed, but only one, the elementary gets it to home to school. They don't get transportation money from the state.
And so we pay across.
We have the bus passes, and we get money for that, but the
Students buy the bus passes.
Right. Yeah.
So I'm just curious. It would be great to have some follow-up on what that
Yeah, we'll go back
217
and take a look at
is.
that.
So,
Do we sell the bus passes at a discount?
Yeah, I think we do underwrite them.
for a small amount, yeah, but it's,
Yeah.
it can't be anywhere near this.
So this isn't the school bus vans that pick up the severely handicapped students in
Yeah,
transit?
that would be
No.
special ed.
Right, okay.
But actually, I think we spend quite a bit of money on MTD. I want to say like $85,000. Yeah, I don't know about secondary though. We'll have to go back and
That would
research
only be for
this.
secondary,
It
so.
wouldn't be
Yeah, it is secondary. Let me go back and research that. So the next chart is net change in the unrestricted ending balance, and this chart shows you basically a line, and the positive number shows you that when the bar's above the center line, that means the district had more unrestricted income than expenditures. When you have the bar below the line, it means the opposite's true. So what you can see is that in some of the prior years, we actually were above the line, and you can kind of see what's happening here in 10, 11, and then what 11 and 12 show you is basically the $10 million being cut and what's contemplated there. If you did not have the 10 million, you'd see this line keep getting bigger below the deficit. And kind of a corollary chart is that basically the district's reserve or net ending balance. And what you see there is basically what has happened over the last several years. In 07, 08, 8, 9, 9, 10, where we had large reserves, basically, we've cut, but the state keeps reducing the amount of income, and we have to keep cutting, and we've cut. We've never cut to a point where we've basically revenues and expenditures were perfectly equal because we didn't think we had to, because we thought this thing would not be sustained for 4 or 5 years. And so now what we're seeing is that we're down at the reserve level, even cutting $10 million. Couple of other issues, nothing significant in the other funds. You can see the Child Development Fund, we still have a negative change to fund balance here between first and second interim. if you go to page 18, which is the cafeteria fund, a little net bump and increase. Deferred maintenance, building funds, capital facilities, those are all showing that you're burning down some of the, principal and interest, which is what you would expect in building funds. You don't have a lot of activity in these funds. We haven't issued the bonds. We're not doing a lot. But we're seeing a little bit of activity. So we're up to the multi-year projection. Meg, are you ready to go yet? So obviously, we do a multi-year projection so we can demonstrate that we can meet, our minimum reserve requirement in the current and subsequent 2 years. And we use the industry standard assumptions, which come from the School Services of California Financial Dartboard. We use a cohort survival, actually a modified cohort survival method to project enrollment, which drives, what our revenue limit calculation is, as well as several of our other funding calculations. And then basically we use industry standard and our own data to basically identify what our staffing is going to be, and we extrapolate that and roll that forward as well. So, is it not working?
Hello? Yeah, it's working.
No, I'm talking about your
Oh.
computer. There's
Well,
nothing on the screen.
what I'm first going to show you is on page 128, and I know it's been a late night, so we're not going to, dwell on this, but I'll take any questions you have. I know it's hard to see, and I'm thinking about putting the actual software on the computer so we can enlarge it and make it sharper and everything, but we were kind of busy this time with the solvency plan. I want to start off by saying, first of all, that between the first and second interim, just in the deficit for the out years in 10, 11, and 11, 12, and 12, 13, the deficit has moved from 17.963% to 19.608%. And that you see that on line F, A1F, and that's the first highlighted line. So our deficit did increase by quite a bit, and that includes that $19 that we keep talking about, that they gave us the COLA of 1.67, but then they deficited us more and took it away, and then took away another additional $19. So that's where that plays in. The next line you see is the $3.5 million, and that is the reason why that jumps from the 10-11, which is $396,000, is the 4.4. With the non-extension of the revenues. We had to plan for that, so I had to put a negative $4.4 million in there to represent if the taxes don't get reinstated. So that's why you see that.
So the 4.4 is actually
A net
the difference,
effect.
net effect of the 396.
Yes, yes,
And that's why you came up with 3.3.
exactly. There's not many places to put things in here, so we've got to be creative in that respect. Then the next thing I want to just point out, the multi-year projections have not really changed that much, except that for those two items up there. And then down here at the bottom, we have our $10.7 million that I needed to cut to make the reserve. And that's because, Dave, if you'll push it up just a little bit, all the way to the bottom. Our ending fund balance, we're projecting to be $700,000 less than we did its first interim. So there's $700,000. But we do have that 1.5, so that's why we didn't really want to include it in the 10 million as a cushion. We may end up a lot better than that, but this is our best estimate now.
The other thing too is that it's very difficult for us to quantify what the freeze will actually result in. I mean, we actually implemented that freeze right after January 1st. And I know it caught a lot of people flat-footed, which was its intent. And so we're hoping that'll help the ending balance as well. So
Exactly. So on the unrestricted, or the restricted side on page 130, I'm not going to put that up because basically we're spending down, what we should be doing is spending down our restricted side of the budget. That's what it's there for, and we're doing a good job of that. We only end up with about $600,000 projected for the year end, and then for 11-12, we're zero, 12-13, we're zero for fund balance. Now, the last thing I want to show.
Could you comment on the multi-year let's see, 1B above, the 0 beyond the 3%. Well, just look straight up from the bottom line.
The 434,000? Is that what you're saying?
Right, and then carry that across to the next 2 years.
You've got nothing above 3%.
Exactly.
Yeah, so
That's-
could you
okay.
highlight that,
Ye-
Dave? Because we do want to point that out. In the next year, we make the 3%. Okay, now go to the next year over.
So this is kind of like a little bit of a cush because there's our 3%, right? So we have a little bit left over. But if you take this number, our ending fund balance right here, and carry it forward over here, you see that our 3.5%, or our 3% is 3.5 million, and we have nothing. We're right at 3%.
And carry it.
Then you take this number, 3.5, and take it over here.
Yeah, it's a good example of your ending balance becoming your beginning balance.
Exactly, and so there's our 3%. As you can see, this is getting less because we had to cut $10 million out of this whole budget.
But I still want the caveat that that does not reflect the 1.5 million in one time or anything that might accrue due to the freeze.
Exactly.
So when we come back with our variance report, it's why we had a bigger ending balance at second interim. I stated it right here.
Okay, and the final thing that I want to show is that you can see here that we do, this is my goal, to get yes all the way across the bottom, which means yes, you make your 3% reserve. Up here is the actual reserve amount. It's 3.4, 3.0, and 3.01 in 12-13. Yeah, I'm sorry, this is page 133. Now, we'd like to show you one last thing, and that's on the computer. Oh, sorry. So this is an interesting little task we did the other day. So we wanted to see how much money we've lost over the past 4 years. And starting with 08-09, there was 11.43% deficit. Our entitlement was $92.9 million.
Can you show that with a pointer?
Here. Okay, so there was our deficit factor, and we thought that was horrendous at the time of 08-09. Then we got, this is revenue limit only. So our revenue limit entitlement is $92.9 million. After you take the deficit away, we received $82 million, and the loss of revenue is $10.6 million. We go down to 9-10, we go to 18.355%. We're entitled to $95 million. We received $77 million, a decrease in revenue of $17 million. Again, 2010-11, our deficit is 17.96. We're entitlement to $94 million. Actually, we're going to get 77, another $17 million in loss of revenue. Projected 11-12, deficit of 19.68%, $94 million entitlement, 75 actual, total of $18 million in loss of revenue. For a total of the 4 years, sorry, I missed that purple one, $63 million since 2008-9. So what does this have to do an effect of our fund balance? Fund balance, we began 2007-8, ending fund balance of 2007-8 was $10 million. When fund balance in 8-9, our ending fund balance was $10,993, not bad. We decreased our fund balance by $602,000. Beginning fund balance, again, was our ending fund balance for 08-09, is our ending balance for that's right, 8-9. Then our ending balance in 9-10 is $8.5 million, so we decreased our fund balance between 8-9 and 9-10 for almost $1.5 million. In 11-12, we're anticipating a $4.7 million deficit, which decreased our fund balance of $3.8 million. There again, in 11-12, we're projecting to decrease our fund balance by $1.2 million. So we're dwindling.
And I think a couple of the things in the prior years, remember that we had federal ARA dollars, we had, one-time, one-time revenue sources that allowed us. I mean, part of it is we did bolster our ending balance by doing a number of one-time adjustments, but we also had ARA, but we didn't truly cut the ongoing expense. So what this shows you is two things. One, we know we've made, extraordinary cuts, but you're not cutting fast enough to keep pace with the lack of revenue that the state is giving you. But what we have managed to do is avert a lot of the very, very difficult choices until this time because we had bigger reserves than most districts during the same period of time.
And if I may, Ms. Cordero, I wanted to just chime in on two things here. One is the language that you're using, because it says fund balance here, but we often refer to that as the reserves, the designated and undesignated reserves. So that's showing the drop in our reserves over the past few years. And members of the public who might be used to hearing reserves, I think it'd be helpful to tie that in together. I'm also wondering if we can post this in the budget section of our website so that people can really see what's been happening to us and what will be continuing to happen to us.
And what this doesn't show you is the reductions that we've taken in categoricals. So if you had any kind of categorical program, especially state categorical program that already encroached, and it got hit with a 19.28, is that what it was? It was almost 20% deficit. That has to come from someplace. Either, the unrestricted general fund kicks in more, or you actually reduce or eliminate the program.
And in 2008-9, that ending fund balance too included some of those 08 those state categoricals
Yeah,
that
we
we
did a
moved
lot of
on to
sweep.
the unrestricted side.
That's right.
So,
And so we're hoping that, that when we get to the end of 10, 11, we have a little bit better fund balance than what we're projecting here, so.
any questions?
Unfortunately, it seems all too clear.
So,
Board members, any questions or?
Who got
Mr.
that,
Smith,
who got
did you-
that $67 million that we didn't get?
the state didn't give it to you.
And they don't owe it to us?
No, well, that's a great question, because, Meg, can you put that back up? Depending on who you are, there's kind of two schools of thought among people in school finance. And the first time we saw a really bad deficit was in the early 90s. We got up to a deficit factor on the revenue limit at 11%. We said it's never going to get any worse than this. So at that point in time, there was a lot of people that said, well, you know what, we should just rebench it and do away with the deficit factor. And then there was another camp that said, no, leave the deficit there, because basically if times are better, then basically that documents how much the state owes you. So if Prop 98 becomes more robust in the future, in theory, you might have heard me talk about deficit reduction. That deficit would actually be reduced on a percentage by percentage basis, which is kind of like us getting a COLA, but it's more like getting restored to what you were entitled to in the first place, but it's still more money. So, right now it's at 19%. Obviously, if it was dropped in half, that would be a lot of money. And so one of the things that we talked about relative to the unification is that equalization will no longer be an issue for us because we'll be above the statewide average for unified districts. But deficit, what they call deficit reduction, is still a huge issue for us because even though we'll have a higher revenue limit, that deficit will still be applied. And if there's money in the future to restore or reduce the deficit, then we would actually get the benefit like all other school districts in the state of California, as opposed to equalization only pertains to a subset of districts.
I wouldn't hold my breath to get that money back.
One can always dream, though.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, so thank you very much. You've done a Herculean job for us tonight, Mr. Smith, so we We appreciate you.
And I'd be willing to go ahead and make a motion
Okay.
to approve the positive certification of the 2010-11 second interim financial report. Certification is what I meant to say.
Okay, is there a second?
I will second.
Okay. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries 5-0, and thank you very much.
Thank you.
Ms. Cordero?
Yes.
Could we ask the board to revisit E2 once again?
Yes, we will.
It's a night of E2.
We can't get away from it. We think that we are done, and we have to keep coming back. So what is the concern with
Well,
E2?
I think I can explain it pretty well. What we heard in the motion was, first of all, bringing back 5 of the furlough days. Second, bringing back the other 5 furlough days. Third, taking a look at the MAD 35-1, which is S, then U, parity in staffing high schools, those 2, actually. And then finally, another category 4, which is do not bring back. In other words, these are permanent. C, mandated cost reimbursement. M, eliminating the maximum nurses. And O, the 2 program specialists. But what we didn't hear is any positioning of B, which is the 50% sweep of categoricals in that list.
So can I modify my motion?
How about a new motion?
A new motion.
Okay, we are revisiting item
position it in that list.
E2, so we can add an additional motion if
So-
you would like.
The way that I understood it, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that we are initially taking the 10,400,000 plus to the negotiating table, hoping that we can bring back the 400,000 to put back in tier 3 to eliminate that from 50% to to eliminate it by 25%. Upon that negotiation, bring back in phase 1 5 furlough days, bring back in phase 2 an additional 5 furlough days, bring back in phase 3 the remaining tier 3 categorical, as well as the ratio for the MAD and possibly the parity, and not bring back items M and O, which were the maximum nurses and site level program specialists.
Second.
Okay, so is this a replacement motion?
Yes.
Okay, so then,
Okay.
do we have to vote to rescind the original, or can we just vote on this new one?
Well, I think this new one can replace the.
Okay, so we can just, okay,
The
so
original.
we have a motion made and seconded. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries 5-0.
Thank you.
Okay. We are now moving on to item E4, approval of board action on student discipline case numbers 10/11-09, 10/11-17, 10/11-19, 10/11-20, 10/11-23, 10/11-24, 10/11-31, 10/11-32, and 10/11-35. Do we have a motion on these cases?
I'm happy to run through and maybe there'll be the same person that could second me each time to try to simplify matters for our note taker, which is what we've often tried to do. In case 10/11-09, I move to approve the stipulated agreement for a 1 school year suspended expulsion.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries 5-0.
In 10/11-17, I move to uphold the findings and recommendations of the hearing panel, except for it will be for 1 school year suspended expulsion and a transfer to a different high school.
Is there a second?
I will second that.
Okay. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, motion carries 5-0.
In case 10/11-19, move to uphold the findings and recommendations of the hearing panel for 1 school year expulsion.
Second.
All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries 5-0.
In case 10/11-20, move to uphold the findings and recommendations of the hearing panel for a 1 calendar year expulsion.
Second.
Okay. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries 5-0.
In case 10/11-23, move to suspend the expulsion and instate the 1 school year expulsion that we approved on February 8th, 2011.
Second.
Okay. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstention? Motion carries 5-0.
In case 10/11-24, move to accept the stipulated agreement for a 1 school year expulsion.
Second.
Okay. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries 5-0.
In case 10/11-31, move to uphold the findings and recommendations of the hearing panel for a 1 school year expulsion.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries 5-0.
In 10/11-32, move to uphold the findings and recommendations of the hearing panel for a 1 school year expulsion.
Is there a second?
This says suspended, it's on mine, suspended.
This is 10/11-32.
Ooh, 32, okay.
Let's not mix that one up again.
Okay. Second.
Yeah. Sorry.
Okay, we have a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries 5-0.
Sorry. In case
This is a carryover from our closed session.
In 10/11-35, move to uphold the findings and recommendations of the, scratch that, move to accept the stipulated agreement for a 1 calendar year suspended expulsion.
Second.
Okay. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries 5-0. Okay,
I'm impressed.
we made it through those. Yes, we are. We did.
And Robin got it all.
And, good. Yeah. Okay, that's what happens when we go to
Yeah.
almost 11 o'clock.
And those are all very serious items, and,
really
you know, and so I don't mean to
No,
give
and-
levity to it, and I
No.
apologize for that.
I do apologize too.
Yeah,
It was
those
strictly a holdover from previous discussion.
Every single one of those is just a tragedy.
Okay, we have nothing to return to the consent agenda. Coming events, I think we have covered those. Is there anything else that we need to discuss in the coming events? Okay. Future agenda items, are there any things on, that we want to, I'm sorry, Ms. Deacon?
I'm going to repeat one of my revolving requests, which is that we get a report out on the income that we're bringing in from our...
This Friday's board brief.
Oh, really? Oh, good. Okay. Then you beat me to it. Thank you.
Well, I'll hold my breath.
Okay. So, are there any other,
And it's not Dave Hetyoungs to deliver.
Okay.
It's, but-
Are
but
there-
he keeps pushing too. Thank you.
any other future
Well,
agenda
just-
items that we,
On that item, is that if, I think I know what you're talking about, is that something that's going to take board action?
No, no. You might elicit board discussion about facility fees
Oh,
or.
okay. I was thinking something different. I was thinking about the charging administrative fees for donations. That's not,
No.
Then-
okay.
So this
Not
is,
That's coming too.
okay, so our next regularly scheduled board meeting is on March 22nd. I think that brings us to the conclusion of our meeting, and we're only an hour over time. Okay, that, we will adjourn the meeting.